This evening I wanted to prepare something on the exam to give you a heads up of where you're heading in terms of the course and to give you an idea in terms of what the exam genuinely will hold for you. To start off with the examination cover page, you'll see that it's open book, of course, and I've mentioned on the Moodle homepage already that examinations will be contacting you, as I understand, in the next couple of days to articulate the timing of the exam and how that will all occur. That all occurs quite separately from me. I had the chance in the last couple of days to speak to examinations about how the exam is facilitated, and they will communicate with you about that. And that, other than obviously the exams then coming back to me for marking, and then obviously they go back into the faculty system in terms of moderation, and my involvement directly with the sitting of your exam it doesn't occur with much involvement from me in that sense. You'll see firstly on this front page that it's 180 minutes, 15 minutes perusal time. The instructions: dictionary is allowed, but it must be a non-electronic, concise, direct translation only dictionary, must not contain any notes or comments. Law dictionaries, business and law dictionaries are authorised. No calculators are permitted. You'll get one rough paper and 2 exam answer booklets. In terms of the number of questions, on the second page here, you'll see you have to write all answers in the examination answer booklet provided. You must answer 3 of the 5 questions. All questions are of equal value. There are 20 marks each, and there's 60 marks in total, which obviously 60%. And if you answer more than 3 questions, only the first 3 will be marked. So to talk further about the structure of the exam, and obviously we're going to revisit some more of the detail of the issues relating to the questions rather than the questions themselves later in the semester. But I just wanted to give you a general heads up about the structure. Question 1 is a problem question. It's about 4 or 5 paragraphs long. It says you are working for the Department of Public Prosecutions, and you have to, having regard to that role, deal with a number of factual scenarios, obviously based upon statutory interpretation, and analyse those in terms of case law. There is a specific case that is of relevance to this question, and obviously I'm going to tell you all what, by virtue of this recording, what that case is. And the case is Gedeon, Gedeon, and the Commissioner of the New South Wales Crime Commission. And the reference for that case is 2008 High Court of Australia 43. So the reason I mention that case is very, very broadly, in a broad sense, not in an exact sense, this question, this first question, very broadly is based on some facts which have some similarity generally to the facts of that case. And that might then give you an idea as to, if you were to take that case, which obviously is a High Court decision, very detailed, and to condense it down into a very, very short set of 4 or 5 paragraphs that then might be the basis for a problem question. So a problem question being a question where you're given a set of fake or make-up facts and you have to apply some legal principles to those facts. So that's the first question. The second question is an essay-style question. And it's a quote from Justice Michael Kirby, as he then was, of the High Court of Australia. Obviously, I won't tell you what the quote is, but it's a quote that you then can refer to in terms of what it's saying and the relevance of it. And we'll talk potentially at the end of the semester, we might talk about some of the things that might be specifically relevant to that. But at this stage, I'll just tell you it's a quote and it's an essay question relating to that quote. The third question is another set of facts. It's quite short, only a couple of paragraphs of facts about a background to something that's relevant to the state government, and then the state government passes a new section in an act and you get given that section, and as a result of looking at that section, you're then given a set of facts that occur. So in some ways it has some similarity probably to some of the things you might have done in question 2 of your assignment. That is, you're given a set of a statute or statutory provision, and then you have to apply that provision to a set of facts. So I suppose you'd call that a problem question again. Question 4 is quite similar. That is, you're given some background information, then you're given a section, and then you're given some things which occur as a result of that, or some factual things which occur subsequent to the enactment of that section, and you have to apply those things. And the final question, the 5th question, very similar again. You're given a couple of paragraphs of background, then you're given a specific section. In this case, it's part of a schedule of an act. So it's just a short piece of statutory text. And then you're asked, well, you're representing an individual, and how might what might be the situation applicable to that individual? So you can see there is one essay question. There are 4 problem questions, so described. You can pick, obviously, any question or questions you like out of that group. One comment I would make to you in terms of your answers, particularly with the problem questions, so there are 4 problem questions as we just discussed. You might have heard of the phrase IRAC, I-R-A-C, or I like to use the phrase Q for question. So ask yourself a question. What is the question I'm being asked? What specifically am I being asked? Am I being asked to advise Billy Bloggs or Charlie or Henry, whoever it is? Who am I being asked to assist? And be very focused on what I'm being asked about that. Then the next thing is, well, if that's the question, what's the issue or issues that are relevant? Is it an issue of the purpose rule, for example? Is it an issue of something like that? Is it an issue in terms of the meaning of some phrases relevant to the Acts Interpretation Act? So whatever the issue is or issues, the hardest part in any legal problem question is to identify those issues. Once you've identified the relevant issues or issues, what are the facts that are relevant to that issue? Because obviously you're given quite an amount of facts, or you're given maybe more facts than you need. And you might have to distill out of those facts the key things that you say are the most relevant or the most particularly relevant. Once you've identified, therefore, the question, the issue or issues, the relevant facts, you then have to determine, well, what's the relevant law? And there might be a number of cases or statutory provisions which are relevant to those circumstances. Once you've done that, you need to apply the law to the facts, application, which is the next one. You can then come to some type of conclusion, and your conclusion will, of course, be based on that application. You're concluding as to the issue. So if the issue was whether the Acts Interpretation Act provisions are applicable in these circumstances, your conclusion might be, yes, they are. Section whatever is the applicable section in these circumstances. But don't forget, if you're concluding as to the issue, you need to answer the question. So the question might be, does Charlie or whoever it is, does Billy Bloggs, is Billy Bloggs liable under that provision, etc.? And your answer to that might be, yes, Billy Bloggs is liable under that provision. So you might be able to use those subheadings, if I call them that, or headings, as a mental reference for yourself in dealing with, in a structured way, with the problem questions in particular. I would encourage you to try to structure your answers using headings and subheadings as much as possible. That gives clarity to the reader. It allows you to be clearer in what you're dealing with at that point in time in your answer. It breaks up your answers and shows that you have a structured approach in the way you're handling those answers in the exam. And I think it allows you to be very clear in the way you prepare for these different types of questions. One of the things I would encourage you to do also is to not write in huge blocks of text in the exam answer booklets. One of the things you'll often find is that if you write in huge blocks of text, you'll get to a certain point and you'll realise, well, gee, I wish I'd referred to something earlier on. By breaking up your questions, giving yourself a bit of space between subheadings, you'll then create the opportunity to revert back to an earlier subheading potentially and to add text in rather than drawing little lines and bubbles and things like this. By giving yourself space between subheadings and headings, you can actually revert back over time and add in additional sentences if you need to on the questions. Something to think about. In terms of the exam, I would make some general comments that I think you should avoid the desire when you're in perusal to immediately start reading all the questions. In perusal in particular, I'd encourage you to follow a fairly structured approach in the way you prepare to start writing when you're allowed to after the end of perusal. What I mean by that is, I think there's a danger potentially in law exams that you come into the exam and you start reading the questions. Your anxiety might be up just a little bit by virtue of the fact that it's an exam, and there's a temptation to get lost in all the information that's in front of you. What you might consider doing is focusing firstly on how much time should I be spending on each of these questions, and not just time on the question as a whole, but if the question has little part questions in it, breaking up that timing so that you're dealing appropriately in a time sense with not just the question as a whole, but in the individual parts of a question if there are any sub-questions within the question. For example, if there's Billy Bloggs and Henry in the question and you're asked to advise the two of them, well, you wouldn't want to spend all your time on Billy Bloggs and not spend the exact corresponding amount of time on Henry. That's very important because, of course, the marker in due course will be trying to allocate marks in accordance with any sub-questions that might exist within the question. And if you leave out half of the the answer, in the sense that you don't deal with one individual or one sub-question, that's obviously going to make it more difficult for you to get the very highest marks. So time is very important, because you'll find you always inevitably have, as I'm sure you know from your previous studies, time is always an issue in examinations. And so you're trying to maximise the efficiency of your time by being very accurate about the amount of time I'll spend on this question, not going over or under the time allocation. In that perusal period, I think it's very important then to identify, to look at the different types of questions, i.e. you have an essay question, you have a series of problem questions, but also to look at the issues relevant to those questions. And if the issue in question 1 is known to you, and question 4 might be known to you, and obviously we're going to talk a bit more about some of those broad brush issues rather than the specifics in question, or the specifics of the question, I should say. But if those broad brush issues are things that you feel more comfortable with, obviously that's going to have an impact on whether you do or don't do those questions on the exam. So just recapping, focus firstly, I think, on the timing. Secondly, on the question type. Thirdly, on the issues relating to that specific question as you work through them. I think, and when I say the question issues, you still haven't, in my view, I don't think, and this is just my recommendation, that you would read all of the questions during perusal. In fact, you just glance through them to get a feeling for what the questions might be like in terms of their structure and their issues. And then even before you've read it, you might be able to make a decision as to which questions you're going to answer, and then finally the order in which you're going to answer them. And when I say that in terms of the order of answering them, normally I think the natural thing would be to answer the easiest to the hardest, easiest one first, etc., etc. Sometimes, although people tell me they might do the reverse. If they're feeling a bit tired, they might do the hardest one first, get it out of the way, and then work down to the easy ones. To each their own. I think of all the things I'd emphasise, it would be this. It would be not to go over time or under time on questions, to use up the available time and to structure your questions as much as possible. I think it's a fair comment to say, when you see a very structured answer to a question with clear headings and subheadings, and then obviously the detailed analysis under those headings and subheadings, usually that student will do extremely well. In terms of preparing for the exam, I would suggest a few things. That each week you develop your own set of notes. And when I say your own set of notes, 2 or 3 or 4 pages, absolute maximum, about what you took out of that week. And over a number of weeks, you might modify and adjust those notes, whether it comes from the Zoom sessions, from the notes, from the textbook, from things you might read on the internet, from articles you might read, etc., etc. However you develop those notes, from talking to your friends and interplaying with them on what their notes were for that week as well, however you develop those notes for each week, or for each topic, I should say, that 3 or 4 pages becomes very important, because it's your primary reference point in terms of revising that week. And I would say that each time you sit down to study for the subject, that you be quite focused in trying to study for a block of time that equates in some way with the 180 minutes you're going to have to focus on this subject for when it comes to the exam. And obviously for everyone, myself included, we have demanding pressures in terms of our competing work and personal and study, etc. commitments. But in terms of the timing, in terms of your study, obviously the preference is to try to study at approximately the time when you will have to sit the exam. If you always study from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning, and the exam obviously isn't during that time, maybe, and I certainly have seen people over the years, particularly when I was at university, they did all their study in the twilight hours of the morning, for etc., and they always found it hard to be at their very peak in terms of their quality of their examination performance at 11 a.m. in the morning, for example. And that's often a challenge. I think the key thing is once you've got a set of notes that you feel comfortable with, you understand the key points arising from them in those notes, that you then focus on reading them, on writing them, on reading, writing, maybe saying, listening to, and maybe diagrammatically representing them. And by the diagrammatically representing them, I mean the mind map type approach, whereby you put a key word in the middle of the page and then expanding out from that word are the key issues that relate to it. And so by doing that, I think you'll find if you understand them in the written form, you're going to understand them even more. And what that does in an exam like this, where you've got problem questions, is it allows you to better analyse what the key issues are. And that's the real challenge. Working out what is the issue I'm really being asked to deal with in this problem. And obviously, when the semester is coming to a close and we're leading into the exam, I'm going to revert back to talk more again about the examination, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the issues in each of these 4 problem questions in particular, and also in the essay question that you've got. Anyway, so that's a bit of a general introduction. I just wanted you to get a bit of a heads up for, firstly, the structure of the examination, for the way, some different mechanisms that might be of some assistance to you. And of course, everybody is different. Everybody approaches things in a different way, but just some thoughts that might be of some benefit in terms of your preparation for the exam, in terms of what you might do during perusal, in terms of what you might do in terms of answering specific questions, and things that might assist you as part of that process.